the Literary Princess, and today I have a George Eliot project video for you. Today we are talking about Silas Marner, which I read in September. So this was my second time reading Silas Marner. I had actually read it in my first year of high school for my English class and thought it was pretty boring, honestly. I remember I had read The Mill on the Floss before this, so I was like, and I'd loved The Mill on the Floss, so I was trying to justify this. I was like, it's gotta get better, it's gotta get better. And meanwhile, everyone else in my class was like, wow, this is terrible. And I was like, yeah, it's not great. However, my opinion has changed upon reread. So this is George Eliot's third novel, published in 1861. It is also her shortest novel. Thank goodness for that. And I will first talk a bit about the plot and the characters, and then I will talk about my thoughts. There will be spoilers because honestly, I just don't know how to talk about a George Eliot novel without kind of telling you everything. Because again, I've said this every single time, this is not a plot-driven story. This is very character-driven. Not a lot happens. And when it does, it's developing the characters. So there's just really no good way for me to talk about this without kind of giving you everything. But it is still definitely worth reading because George Eliot's writing is lovely, and I think seeing it all play out is better than hearing me talk about it, probably. So this focuses on a man named Silas Marner. He is originally from a community called Lantern Yard, who are a religious community, and they seem a bit they're not traditional Church of England. Like, they believe in the drawing of lots. They believe that Silas's kind of fits or seizures might be either from God or from the devil. They're a bit intense. And Silas, as a young man, is accused of stealing money, and he's framed for it by a friend of his. And he is kind of cast out of the community once he is found guilty through the drawing of lots, which is not a good justice system, folks, at all. His fiancée breaks off their engagement, he loses his faith in God, and he moves away to a rural town. And in this new rural town, he's kind of seen as an outsider. People are skeptical of him. He's a weaver, he makes his money that way, and he ends up kind of hoarding this little pile of money that gets quite large that he hides under his floorboards or in a hole in the floor. I don't know if it's actually under a floorboard, because if I remember, it's like a dirt floor. But anyway, it is hidden on the floor of his house. And he's kind of a miser. He like takes the gold out and counts it every night type deal. So his money has kind of replaced God in his heart at this point. However, in this new town, there is also the Cass family, and the father is Squire Cass, and he has two sons, Godfrey and Dunstan. And Godfrey is generally a good person, but he has made some poor choices, including a secret marriage to a woman below his station. And he is then blackmailed by his brother Dunstan into giving him money, because otherwise Dunstan will tell their father his secret and get him disinherited. Dunstan ends up stealing Silas's money and then just vanishes. And in the meantime, Godfrey's secret wife comes with her child and is going to reveal herself to Squire Cass. However, she freezes to death in the snow on New Year's Eve, and her little daughter wanders into Silas's house. And at first Silas sees her blonde hair and thinks, oh my God, it's my gold, return to me, and then realizes, no, it's this child. He ends up raising her because Godfrey does not step up and say, this is my child. He's like, no, I can't do that. So Silas raises this little girl who he names Epi, and this really brings him into the community. He's getting help from one of the wives of the community, whose name I am not, Dolly Winthrop. I just looked over there, it's up on my screen. Dolly Winthrop. So he really becomes integrated. He starts going to church. He begins believing in God again. And it is all because of Epi, who he kind of sees as like his treasure returned to him in an even better form. We do eventually flash forward to when Epi is a young woman, and then her parentage gets kind of revealed, and she has to make a choice about whether she wants to become a kind of lady or stay with this man who has raised her whole life, even though that would mean a life of a kind of poverty. So the big thing with Silas Marner is that it is a work of realism. Eliot is trying really hard here to represent regular people in their regular everyday life. And the book has been very praised for that. There's also a lot of themes regarding morality and religion and destiny. So we have these characters who make, in some cases, really bad choices and end up kind of getting what they deserve because of it. Like, Dunstan dies, Godfrey gets the girl that he wants to marry, but they can never have children. And then Silas is really richly rewarded with this lovely daughter who he adores and who adores him. He ends up getting his money back at the end. So it's very the good are rewarded and the people that are not so great or have just made bad choices kind of get it at the end. There is a lot about religion in this, about the importance of religion and having faith. There's a lot about the community versus the individual. A big part of this is Silas becoming a part of the community, where he has been shunned from his former community of Lantern Yard, and where in the village he's currently in, Raveloe? He's seen as an outsider until he first comes to them with this story of, oh my god, my money's been stolen, and then becomes even further ingrained into the community when he has Epi, because he needs help. And people also think it's a great thing for him to do to just take in this little girl, even though he's an older single man. So ultimately, it's a very slow story. It's a character study. I've said that about every single George Eliot book so far. I would say that it's probably my second favorite of the books I've read from her during the George Eliot project. So Mill and the Floss would be first, and this would be next. I will say, and I've said this about almost everything except her short stories, George Eliot had pacing problems with her books. So, I mean, the first maybe 12 chapters are kind of just dealing with backstory and explaining these characters to us. And then we finally have Epi show up. And that's like kind of when things start happening. So a lot of this is just people talking, people getting background information. We do get some of Dunstan being an idiot. But again, I would say the majority of the book, like the stuff that actually happens, is in this smaller part, whereas the bigger part is just taken up with a lot of information that's important for the character growth, but it results in it being a very slow-moving book. It is not as difficult to get through because it's so much shorter than, say, Adam Bede or The Mill on the Floss. So it is not quite as noticeable in Silas Marner, but I do think Eliot has pacing problems. Very much so. I think she spends too much time on things that are leading up to the events and then not enough time on the events themselves. And I have found that true in Adam Bede and The Mill on the Floss. I find it true here. It's not as egregious because of how much shorter this book is. I ultimately did really like it. I gave it 4 stars. I just found, honestly, the scenes of Silas trying to figure out how to raise this small child were hilarious. There's one point where she does something naughty, and Dolly Winthrop is like, you have to punish her. She's just gonna keep doing naughty things. Lock her in the coal hole or something. And so he's like, okay, I'll lock Eppie in the coal hole. You know, he doesn't really want to, and he feels really bad. And so he does that, and then he gets her out. He gets her all clean. And then Eppie just goes back in the coal hole because she thought it was like a great joke. And he's like, I'm just not gonna punish her anymore. So some of those scenes were really sweet and I enjoyed them. I got really infuriated with Godfrey at the end of this book. I think he's acting like an absolute dick. But I was ultimately very happy with how the book ended, which I don't think I can say for the other novels I've read by George Eliot for the most part, because I definitely wasn't really happy with The Mill on the Floss's ending this time around. I wasn't a huge fan of Adam Bede's ending, and then I have had problems with some of the endings of her other books. So this was probably the most satisfying ending George Eliot has ever given to me. I would definitely recommend this, and I would recommend if you want to start with George Eliot to start here, because it definitely gives you a sense of what she does in all of her other books without the incredible length of some of her other ones. And it is also the one where her pacing problems are the least noticeable, just because it's so much shorter. So that is my thoughts on Silas Marner. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read it? What did you think? And stay tuned for at the end of October, hopefully, when I will be talking about Romola. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.